Now, Africa is slowly undergoing a rebirth 50 years after most of the colonial powers packed their bags and called it a day. Pan-Africanism and African Renaissance are taking on a new meaning. African leaders used the occasion of the 50th anniversary celebrations of the OAU and the African Union in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia recently to reflect and chart a new path. But what is the state of the continent today, and where has Africa come from, and where exactly is it going? Now, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo takes a hard look at these questions, offering a deeply insightful assessment. But first, just how is Africa proposing to turn a new leaf?
African Renaissance is the idea that African people and nations shall overcome the current challenges facing the continent and achieve cultural, scientific and economic rebirth. This year, Africa celebrated the 50th anniversary of the formation of the Organization of African Unity, now called the African Union. Gathered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in May, African heads of state and government declared 2013 the year of Pan-Africanism and African Renaissance.
So we think this is the right time when we're looking back at 50 years and planning for the next 50 years to recapture that spirit of solidarity, of Pan-Africanism, and the ideal of the African Renaissance.
The picture of Africa as a continent plagued by bloody wars and armed conflicts, political instability, communal violence and displaced persons, all of whom are at the mercy of natural catastrophes like drought and famine, may soon be a thing of the past. Through its rebirth, Africa seeks to overcome these challenges by bringing to an end civil wars, elitism, corruption and poverty, and to replace them with a more just and equitable order. Today, Africa has made major strides politically, with an overwhelming majority of the countries now governed by properly, duly elected governments. In its Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, the African Union outlaws unconstitutional change of power, which is a complete reversal of the trends in the 1970s and 80s, when the battle was a fashionable way of grabbing power. But over the years, Africa has witnessed a radical decline in violent conflict. The independence of South Sudan 2 years ago ended one of the continent's bloodiest and most protracted civil wars. With the support of the international community and regional powers, Somalia is slowly but steadily emerging from 20 years of chaos and lawlessness and slowly shedding the ignominious tag of being a failed state. Africa's conflict hotspots are becoming fewer and far apart. Blessed with vast quantities of natural resources, renewable energy, millions of acres of arable land, and a vibrant, youthful population, the continent has what it takes to change the lives of its people after years of exploitation and marginalization. As Thabo Mbeki would put it, an African Renaissance is clearly underway.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. I want to get your assessment on the state of the African continent today. I mean, Africa recently celebrated 50 years since the independence of the continent. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Actually, it's not 50 years of independence, it's 50 years of the establishment of OAU, the first continental organization. How to assess, from my own point of view, is if we take the OAU, which was an organization that really tried to talk of three things basically: the unity of Africa, the elimination of conflict, and the decolonization of Africa. I think if we look at these three major objectives of OAU running into AU in the last 50 years, I believe we can say that OAU has been fairly successful in its objectives. We've had a number of clashes, but more importantly, what we have had over the 50 years is internal wars within a country rather than external, one country against the other. 2, we have completed the work of decolonization, except the nagging question of the Sahara Republic. And I believe that it's a matter of time, even that will be resolved. I believe that to that extent we can say, yes, the last 50 years in the continent of Africa has not given us all that we wanted.
What do you see as remaining as the challenges, though?
The challenges, we still have occasional coups. We would have thought that by now there will be no more coups, but we had one in Mali not long ago, and one in Central African Republic even this year. I believe these are now becoming aberrations rather than major thing. But even then, as aberrations, we should not condone them. We should not encourage them. We should condemn them when they do happen, and we should see them as challenges. Now, good governance is still a challenge. Corruption is still rife in Africa. We may say that there's no society without corruption, but there are many societies where corruption is not a way of life, where corruption is not carried out with impunity. And that is what we are saying, that corruption should not be a way of life. And to achieve that, corruptors and corrupted must be equally punished. And until you can do that, sanction those who make corruption happen, either by being corruptors or by being corrupted, then we will not be getting out of this pernicious issue of corruption.
You're talking about governance, though, still being an issue, but most of Africa now has what we call electoral democracy. What is the state of electoral democracy in Africa? Has that been an appropriate model?
I think there we have made probably more progress than in other areas. 30 years ago, less than 1/3 of African countries what you can call electoral democracy. Today, I think the countries that are not electoral democracy are exceptions rather than the rule. Then 30, 25 years ago, you have many seat-tight presidents, even if they are there, autocratic, seat-tight. Today, there are very few. If anything, they are becoming a scarce reality. So in the area of democratic or electoral democracy, we are making progress. We still have challenges where elections are, results are contested. But I believe that, yes, if the system is such that the contested election results can be arbitrated by a tribunal or a court, and people learn to accept the verdict of a just and fair arbitration, is good. For me, a disputed election result is better than no election at all.
But former Secretary General, though, Kofi Annan has talked about elections being used by autocratic governments to wrap themselves in a veneer of democratic legitimacy. Is there a concern, though, that in Africa, elections at some stage or in some stages are perpetuating a fraud?
Yeah, well, you have a few of those. but I won't say all of those. I have had the opportunity to observe elections in about half a dozen African countries in the last 3 or 4 years. I observed election in South Africa. I observed election in Togo. I observed election in Ghana. I observed election in Senegal. And in all these, I will say that there's nowhere where election is used as veneer to cover up anything. They were, of course, by any means not perfect, but in all the ones that I have mentioned, the result substantiate the will of the people. That was what the people really wanted. There are minor malpractices. I was in one of them. Even the polling official was tampering with the ballot papers. That you can understand, but that the bad action of one polling official should not make the election result in totality void or null and void. So what I am saying is that, again, elections are human institutions, human organized and human operated. And there's no human institution that you can regard as perfect. What is important is the result. Does it indicate or reveal the will of the people? And once that is achieved, I think it's important.
Make major investments in China.
In child privacy.
Why we are living for?
That's a fundamental government.
Position on China's arrested for by leaders.
I think that's the first step would be to have a dialogue, political change, and human rights.
Don't you think you change human rights?
Dialogue. Ideas matter. Culture Express. See the world in color.
Now, while all indications are that Africa is on the verge of a major economic takeoff, peace and security still remain a major challenge. A new phenomenon that could delay the African dream is taking root in some parts of the continent. Let's take a look.
In its 50 years of existence, the OAU, later known as the AU, has made significant efforts to deal with highly complex, violent conflicts on the continent. Although substantial progress has been made over the past years, Africa continues to face serious peace and security challenges. The situations in the Horn of Africa, the Great Lakes, the Sahel and the CAR, as well as the continued occurrence of unconstitutional change of government, illustrates the complexity of issues that still need to be addressed. But as African heads of state and government gathered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in May to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the founding of the OAU-AU, a new threat to the continent's peace and security loomed large. Terrorism. The emergence of violent extremist groups could dampen Africa's seemingly bright future prospects. Increasingly, the continent is beginning to bear the brunt of terrorist attacks. Decades of conflict in the Islamic Maghreb, the Sahel and the Horn of Africa has spawned armed extremist groups and terrorists. The collapse of Libya has further complicated an already bad situation. Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and Boko Haram have been designated the three most dangerous terrorist groups in Africa, according to the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations. However, Africa lacks a common blueprint for fighting terrorism. Fortunately, African leaders now share the view that transnational security threats to states and people must be urgently and effectively addressed if the continent is to be independent, united and prosperous.
Let's look at Africa's economies today. There is a lot of international attention now on Africa, and some have likened this to a new scramble for Africa's resources. Do you see it as that?
Yes. What have we found in the last 10 or 12 years? The price of natural commodities, minerals, oil have gone up. As a result, almost all African countries have derived increased revenue from their natural resources. But as I have said on a couple of occasions, we had a similar situation immediately after independence in the 60s. And what happened? The price of agri-commodities were very high, and everybody was looking to, or hoping that it will continue. It did not continue. In fact, we were advised that what we needed is what they call import substitution. And we went for import substitution, so we have knockdown components which are brought to Africa. But when the prices of commodities fell, then import substitution failed. And what we are saying now, I am saying particularly, is that we should be cautious so that we do not carry ourselves overboard with this euphoria of increased revenue from natural resources. There are three things for me as far as this situation is concerned. One is that GDP, which is used to measure our economic growth and progress, is not reflected in the life and well-being of our people. Poverty had increased in spite of GDP growth in some countries. Employment has not been generated. Infant mortality rate has not gone down. Number of people who should be in school that are not in school had increased rather than gone down. Now, so there's something wrong in our measuring our well-being and development in terms of GDP growth alone. That's number one. Number two is that how long will this last? Will it be a flash in the pan, as we had in the early 60s, when because our growth, our development were not firmed up in solid foundation when when things fell apart, with apologies to Chinua Achebe, we couldn't hold it.
Do you see, though, that African countries are learning from the past with their current commodities?
We should now learn from the past. We should now put the resources that we are getting into solid use of infrastructural development, of human capacity development, education, health, agriculture. Now, this is what we should do. And then, of course, there is another window opening now, because people are looking up to Africa because of what has happened since 2008 in America, and which has flowed into Eurozone. People are looking to where can they maximize return from their investment. And Africa is one attractive area. How long will this door be open for? Nobody knows. But while the door opens, we should take advantage of it. We should maximize our opportunities that we have.
Africa is now entering, though, into new partnerships, and some panelists have talked about new partnerships being within the framework of Africa's development. What is your view? What is your assessment of Africa's new partnerships, particularly with countries like China?
Well, there's nothing wrong in that. When you go to parts of the Western world and they say, oh, look, how are your new colonial masters? And I say, who are the new colonial masters? And they say, China. I say, why? Now, the amount of Chinese money invested or stocked in America, you know, the whole of Africa will not have 1/10 of it. So if China is not the new colonial master of America, why, with all that they are investing and they have invested in America, why should China be our new colonial master? Now, what is important, as far as I'm concerned, is that, yes, the West was our friend and is still our friend. We have done business with them and we will continue to do business with them. We must not forsake our old friends. And I hope that our old friends will not forsake us. But we must also be ready to make new friends. And China, India, if they choose to be our new friends, we should choose to be their new friends. Now, without, of course, forsaking old friends. And in any case, in our plan and our program for opening out to the rest of the world, we do not differentiate. We have code of investment, we have our open door. We don't have one set of regulations or laws for investors from the West and another one for investors from the East. Now, what I have always said is that, look, Africa is a large continent. The doors are open and we are hospitable. That is one thing that we have in Africa. And as hospitable human beings, we will accommodate all those that come through our gate, be they from the East or be they from the West, provided they respect our rules and regulations and take us as human beings like themselves.
How should Africa, though, take advantage of its relationship with China? How can they maximize? How can they leverage?
We are doing that. We are doing that. I believe that I was the first, or one of the first, if not the first, as an African leader who established strategic partnership with China in very early in the 21st century. And what are we saying? We are saying, yes, whatever you want that we have, let it be of mutual advantage. We want something. And what do we want? We want to be able to have reasonable revenue from our resources. If you want our resources, we need that our laws and rules must be respected. We want infrastructure, and if you can give us that, yes, and we will pay for it either directly or we take loan at reasonable interest rate, and we pay as and when due. Now, this is what we want, and this is what we should get. And then we say, all right, when we do this, it's for mutual benefit. What does China want from us? China wants certain of our commodities to enhance their own development and keep it going. And we should make it available. In fact, the competition between China wanting our part of natural resources and other resources, and the West wanting it, is good for us. It's good for the world, because it makes the world trade go round. And in going round, it enhances what we can obtain from our international trading with either China or the West.
A final comment, Your Excellency, I have to let you go now. Do you see the partnership between China and Africa as a win-win partnership?
It has to be. It has to be. And then both of us must be careful not to take either for granted. We must also be very wary and careful to make sure that we do not rub each other on the wrong side. And that when things go wrong, like this type of thing that has just happened in Ghana with some Chinese individuals doing what they should not do, the Chinese authorities should understand this and step in to make sure that the country concerned, the country that has been robbed on the wrong side, can also take solace in the fact that, oh, this is not encouraged by the Chinese government. It is the misbehavior of individuals, and which is punished not only in Africa but also at home, so that such behavior can be put in check. And if, on the other hand, like I have seen some Africans do things wrong in China, then again, on our own part, we should be able to condemn it. And then if punishment had to be given in China to these people, provided it's fair and equitable, they should be punished, and we should not condone it. So that on both sides, on the Chinese side, they feel comfortable with what is happening in Africa to their investment and to their people. And we, on our side, feel comfortable with what is happening to our people, to our commodities, and to the relationship between Africa and China. It's a relationship that we should cherish and we should nourish.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. Thank you.